I am so excited to have my good friend Ashley Koff here. She is a super busy bee all over the world. She's at conferences, and I'm so glad that she's here with us today at the Pursue Your Spark podcast. And if you don't know who Ashley Koff is, you get to meet her. And here is owner and mastermind behind the Better Nutrition program. She is CNN's top 100 health makers, leading world nutrition expert by Dr. Oz, like in the Dr. Oz show. Top 10 social health makers to follow online, and top 50 natural influencers at New Hope 360 and Shape.com. She is top 10 registered dietitian in the US, Today's Dietitian magazine. Now, if you're not blown away by this intro, I'd like to welcome Ashley Koff to the Pursue Your Spark podcast.
Thanks for having me. This could be so much fun. Yay!
Okay, I also want to tell our audience the difficulties we had, because usually we use Zoom, and Zoom let us down today, and we're fiddling and we're trying to figure out, but you know what? Two amazing women figured it out, and actually, in most part, it was Ashley. She's the more nifty person here when it comes to technology.
We'll see. Let's not say anything. Who knows? Yeah.
So
that's
we're
right.
with you with delay, but we made it happen. I'm so excited that she's here because she has so much knowledge when it comes to diet. It's incredible. She's here with us. And I always love to talk about how I meet my guests. So how did Ashley and I meet?
Well, I remember your spark. So you were so helpful for me. I was coming into one of the idea conference rooms to set up for a talk, and I was like a little bit flustered. When you do some of these things, they just take you in and are like, oh, go do. So ideas as a conference is incredible, but it's as a speaker, it's very much like, all right, you go do your thing. And there was Heike, and she just helped me with it all. So it was great. But I remember afterwards being like, gosh, I want to know who that woman is. And I think we connected there. And then I followed you on social media ever since. And you do have that spark. So I'm very attracted to the work that you do. And we've now had the opportunity to talk with my friend Tess Masters, the Blender Girl, about intermittent fasting. And I just, the energy that you bring to so much of this is incredible. So thank you.
I have to say likewise, because when IDEA, which is the International Fitness Association, has a local trainer conference every year here in the Washington, D.C. area, and of course I want to always learn more about nutrition to help my clients and my tribe with better nutrition. And so I went to Ashley's. I was assigned to the room, and I knew why I was assigned, because I wanted to be there. And she just blew me away with the knowledge she had. She knew what she was talking about, and she was just going for it. And I was taking notes, trying to remember everything. And I said, the best way to connect with this girl is really on social media, because she has so much knowledge to share. And that's why I'm so honored that she's here with us today, sharing so much about nutrition, because I've learned already so much as an affiliate from you.
Thank you.
But you were not born a registered dietitian. So what happened to you that you chose that path?
Well, I could say antibiotics happened to me, and that's maybe not fair, but I do think that, for me, I actually growing up, I grew up in a medical family, so I live in Ohio, so we're not only in Columbus, we're the test location for all the fast food restaurants, if you call them restaurants. So I grew up with exposure to a lot of the, fast casuals that you guys haven't even seen in the rest of the country because they failed here, right? But I also grew up with a dad who worked in medicine as a surgeon, worked with kids. And I remember at different points he would say, gosh, if they ate better, I might not have to operate. And so there were things in my head because I would work in his office. But also my mom was really busy raising the three of us. I have two brothers. And I come back to antibiotics because I didn't know it. I battled as a young child with digestive issues. I didn't even really know I had digestive issues. I just knew I had this belly that I was a cute kid, chubby cheeks, but boy, did I have a belly. And as I got older, when you're talking pretty much through puberty and my young adulthood, I really wanted that belly to go away. And I would try all sorts of different things. And I felt like I would try diets that my friends would try, it was the time of Jenny Craig and like all this other stuff. And no matter what I did, my belly wouldn't get better. And it got really actually pretty bad by the time I got into college. In college also, I got introduced to people who had, I probably had my own disordered eating, but who had significant eating disorders. And so I would try actually to learn. I was trying to pick up tips. And, I had one friend who just said, hey, let's just eat frozen yogurt, from the machine, the swirly machine. Let's just have that for a week, and see if that helps us reach our weight goals. Well, she was doing great. I went out onto the lacrosse field and passed out. Like we were supposed to be doing sprints and I had no energy because I had no nutrition coming in. It was like fat-free, sugar-free. I mean, it was just chemicals, trying to run my body. And so my coach was like, what are you doing? That wasn't going to be helpful for you. So a lot of frustration, a lot of anxiety around that part. And it wasn't until years later, and I think I think my rock bottom was actually a 7-day goat's milk cleanse that I did after having seen kind of a woo-woo practitioner in New York City that was like, diagnosed me as having a worm because she pricked my finger and put it in a Fisher-Price, microscope, like this is what's going on kind of thing. So thankfully, I actually met an integrative gastroenterologist, and their number one question was, were you on antibiotics as a kid? And when we started to unpack what that had done for me in terms of, having my system not have the good bacteria, so I had ear infections and I had tonsil stuff all the time. But it also, what it did decade on decade for me from a health standpoint, really culminating with skin issues and all these other things that were all being separately treated. And when we started to look at repairing my digestive tract, and I was like, whoa, like this is better than therapy. This is better. Like it was just kind of put everything into, all those things are wonderful by themselves, but I wasn't getting, nothing was coming together for me. So when I learned about all of that, I'd been really interested in nutrition, but now I was like, wow, there is power in better nutrition, and we're not being taught better nutrition. And so at the time I was working in advertising, I was selling sugared cereals to America, telling them how good they were for them. I mean, horrible. I was like selling hair color. I mean, like all this stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, there's got to be something better. And so I made the shift to become a dietitian, which I didn't really even know what a dietitian was. There were not all of these great courses and programs and things like that there are today in more of the integrative space. And so I kind of fumbled my way through dietetics, not really believing that it was what I wanted to be doing, but also really wanting that degree to be able to help people. So that's how I arrived at becoming this dietitian who ended up, I did my residency in Los Angeles. So I ended up working with celebrities like year one out of practice, but always coming and talking to them about their digestion, which was helpful. It was really interesting to find that so many of us have those needs.
Yeah, I can imagine that, especially in Hollywood, everybody wants to do the goat's milk diet, so they drop the last 2 pounds before a gala or something. So I can imagine it was really interesting.
Yeah, and I think like the whole notion too of sure, people are focused on weight, but remember, everyone, no matter what your job is, you're also you want to perform. You want to be able to show up in your daily life, and so it's actually really hard to need to be a certain or want to be a certain size. But like even if you're the tiniest of tiny of my male or female actors and they look beautiful, if you digestively don't feel well, it's really hard to like go perform for 14 hours, as a superstar in a, whether it's on stage in front of an audience or, filming a movie.
Yeah, you said so pointedly, you are what you digest and not what you eat. Mm-hmm. And that keeps sticking in my mind, and that's what I'm coaching. I was like, okay, Ashley is like, you are what you digest, not what you eat. Because a lot of people also say food is fuel. And that's also another, I think, misnomer as when it goes, because fuel is great, but if you don't digest it, it's sitting there and it wreaks all kinds of havoc.
Yeah. And it has to be absorbed too. So some of the most interesting work that I've learned about is really that your digestive tract, your entire, like all the way down through us, right? And it has to do with, our chewing and all this other stuff. The digestion, the absorption actually occurs. So if you think about your digestive tract, it's actually skin. It's a tube where there's skin, and that skin, just like on our skin on our hand, absorbs nutrients and sends them inside. And so that whole notion of digesting and absorbing is so key. I think we're giving a lot of credit today for people throwing back, or at least on Instagram, like kale smoothies. And you're like, okay, but are you digesting and absorbing the nutrients that are in there? And likewise with supplements, people are saying like, oh, take this ingredient, take this ingredient. You're like, yeah, but what if it's not in a form that you personally are going to absorb well? So I think that's such a strong consideration.
And I just thought of something when you said that all doctors recommend we should take massive amounts of vitamin D.
Mm.
What is your take on that?
Yeah, and not all doctors do. We're so on the one hand,
Okay.
we're breaking ground in that we have doctors testing vitamin D and recommending it now. So yay, because I've been in practice for 20 years, and when I first started out, that was not the case, and I was like this woo-woo person that was saying, hey, can you get this 25 hydroxy? And I actually created a sticker that my patients could take into their doctor that was like, this is the lab that I want you to order, so we can start looking at the numbers. And I think, so one of the pieces is you can throw a lot of vitamin D into the body, but if the body isn't absorbing it, then you're not going to get those higher amounts. And there are factors that impact that absorption, your hormones, for example. So I know you do a lot of work with perimenopausal or menopausal women, and as women, our hormones are meant to naturally shift. It can feel very unnatural at certain points in our lives how they shift. But I think one of the most important things to understand is that eating right for your hormones is actually a flawed concept. What we want to understand is that when your hormones shift, they throw your digestion off course. And when your digestion is off course, that's actually what's creating the belly bloat or the slowing down of the, of maybe you're constipated, or maybe things aren't being as absorbed as well, or maybe you're having trouble sleeping, or you're feeling, you're all these different pieces. And so I think the notion of vitamin D absorption is really important to understand in the larger context of you really need to look at what is right for you, and just throwing in more is not better. You need the better quality. And then also, and vitamin D is one of those we just aren't going to get a lot of from our food unless you're like a card carrying, hey, I eat wild salmon every single day. I think there are factors. We don't necessarily need a ton more. However, I personally had to take 10,000 IU a day. I didn't take the 50,000 IU. I wasn't deficient in vitamin D, but I wanted to raise mine to a number that I liked better. And so that 10,000, it took me 10,000 IU every single day for 3 months, and it raised my vitamin D 2 points. So that's also important to understand. We're not talking about something that if you eat sugar, your blood sugar spikes through the roof. So it's very important to understand the mechanisms.
Because I was like, and one of my clients in the tribe said, what should I do? Everybody has a take on things. She's a vegan and has for many, many years and eats well balanced. But she says, one person says I should eat this way, and the other person said I should eat that way.
Right.
And he says, who should I believe? And I said, I'm going to ask Ashley.
Yeah, there you go. So the first thing you should do is you should believe yourself. So that's foundational on that part. And the people that work with you, whether it's a coach or a doctor or whatever, they should also believe you. So there are times like recent when I had to get a new doctor, and my new doctor does not believe the same things that I believe about medicine and nutrition. So I've relegated him to only a diagnostic place. I needed him to do, I need my gynecologist to go in and see what's going on in there, right? But that's not going to be the person I'm going to ask about my preventative health or my goals. I'm going to go somewhere else. So one of my biggest frustrations is when somebody says to a vegan, oh, you're a vegan, so you need vitamin D, B12, calcium, like these are the nutrients you're probably not getting in. So stop. You are a person who is following a plant-based diet. So not all plant-based diets are created equal, and not all people are created equal. So the most important thing you do is start out, step one is figure out what are your health goals, and then what is your body currently getting, and what is the difference between what your body is currently getting and what it needs to reach your health goals. So if that vegan said to me, hey, Ashley, I'm a vegan and I would like to be pregnant. We're going to start trying to have a family in 2 years. Then I would say from a health goal standpoint, we want to make sure that you're getting in certain nutrients, and, maybe like she has energy goals or, any of the other stuff. So what we would do is at the Better Nutrition Program, we have these assessments. I created them from my practice, and then have worked with practitioners around the world, and especially in this country, who are practicing what I think is better medicine in those areas. And they've helped me identify what are the key questions and the key nutrients that we need. So what you want to look at is your total nutrition whether you're vegan or not. Your total nutrition is going to be what's going in and on your body most often. And then it's also going to have to do with, things like your preferences or your choices, like not having something from animal. So the question to her is, are you getting in? So yes, you need B12. Are you getting it in from a food source? So for example, I had a vegan that literally put nutritional yeast on everything she had at every meal in the day. I'm not even kidding. There was a faux Parmesan cheese made with Brazil nuts and nutritional yeast. And then she liked to have popcorn with nutritional yeast, etc. So when we looked at that and her labs, her B12 is fine. She's got B12s in store. So I said to her, if you ever decide to break up with nutritional yeast, we have to have the conversation. But even her multi, I wasn't that concerned about, her getting in the B12 there. But on the flip side, she was getting in no vitamin D, right? And that's pretty common. And then she said, oh, but I heard if I eat mushrooms, I get vitamin D. Well, so she does eat mushrooms, like on occasion, she'll add, and not even on occasion. And when we looked at her, and we did the vitamin D evaluation, it was kind of like some days in the week she eats mushrooms. Well, mushrooms, different mushrooms have different amounts of vitamin D, but you'd have to eat like 100, I think it's like 100 grams. Like it's like tons of mushroom. And then the other thing is the mushroom supplements that are vitamin D, they actually are specifically submitting those mushrooms to sunlight. So you actually you would have to be consuming those particular mushrooms, right, to get that higher amount. So in that instance, I said, all right, so priority for you is a supplement of the vitamin D. And that's how we go, point by point. And then one of the other pieces for her was, I said, you do not, as a vegan, you don't have to, it's great that you're getting everything from plants, but we have to work a little bit on your nutrient balance, because she was actually getting in about 3 or 4 servings of carbohydrate at a particular eating occasion. And what that meant was her body's pretty active, so her body was using about 1 or 2 servings, but she was still having issues with both energy, digestion, and belly bloat. And so those 3 things were, when we looked at, hey, if you shift how much carbohydrate you're having at one time. So we did things like, instead of having croutons on her soup, she had hemp seeds instead. And we went through those swaps. So if you're a vegan, don't treat yourself, as great as books are, or as great as online programs are, please don't let yourself be relegated to like, I am like every other vegan that's out there. I think that's pretty flawed approach. So you gotta go with your personal.
So I think it would be super helpful when she listens to our podcast.
Good.
Which brings me then into, of course, it's January. Everybody wants to be on a diet. And the question that I get more than anything is, so what is the best diet for me to lose weight? And that's the quote.
Yeah, totally.
So,
it's so fun on that part. I know you've got your program going on, and I feel like it's great to have programs, especially by somebody that you trust and that isn't like a gimmick or a fad. So thank you on that part. I think the key thing is everybody doesn't love to go on a diet in January. What happens is people don't really like to diet in December, or said differently, we kind of like we kind of go through these cycles. If we're not careful, we can go through these cycles of being really motivated in January, and then unfortunately having that dwindle, and then maybe even feeling like a failure, and then maybe getting really excited to start something again because we're pretty close to summer and maybe bathing suit, or maybe in the summer it's easier to have some motivation, and then we come around to fall and we fall off the wagon, and it tends to be this cycle. So really the answer to that is it would be great if you actually didn't go on a diet in January, and you actually like literally just didn't go on a diet in January. Maybe you even decided, hey, I'm going to do a program or something in February or March, because it's what we really need is we need you to find what's going to work for you. So any diet could work for you. The question is, if your goal is weight loss, are you going to lose fat, or are you going to lose muscle? So one of them is, and is it unwanted fat? So that's going to be key. And then in the loss of that unwanted fat, are you going to be able to be healthy and pursue your spark? Are you going to be able to enjoy your life, right? So you talked about it, when you did your fasting, you said, I couldn't do the kind of training so if somebody's goal right now is, if they're in the middle of training for an Ironman, they cannot do a diet that would be, would not give them enough energy for their training. And so I think that finding the right diet is actually really about saying, it's the same boring piece. Hey, what are your health goals? What are you giving your body right now? And what's the difference between those two? What does your body actually need in order to reach those health goals? And that'll help you. You know, I think when people want to know specifically about keto, for example, I have a keto guide at the Better Nutrition Program, because maybe you do decide to go like more fat. But if you do that, the quality of the fat that you're getting in, and oh, by the way, your body doesn't give up its need for magnesium to turn off the stress response. So you better have either a supplement plan or a food choices on the keto plan that give your body the magnesium it needs. So any diet can be made your Better Nutrition blank, whatever version it is. Yeah.
And that's what I like. Why I like the name of your company, the Better Nutrition. It's not perfect nutrition. It's not diet blah, and it's not something that that is followed just for a month or two or a week or whatever. I mean, I do the 6-day intermittent fasting challenge right now, but I'm teaching everybody nutrition, better habits. Today I was in my kitchen showing what a meal could look like, what a healthy plate could look like, and it's used. And the question I always think is, nobody ever asks me, said, how can I eat healthy?
Right.
You know, how can I diet to be healthy?
Right.
It's about the weight loss. And it brings me back to what you always say, you know what? This may not be for you.
Right. Well, and keep in mind, I'm really focused. It's probably like life stage or age or that. So I'm 45 and, you know, I just moved and we're, you know, figuring out all these things. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, I'm keenly aware of at this stage that you really can't have, like, you can have a lot of things in your life, but if you don't have your health, like, you actually can't do the other things that you have in your life. So you know, what we all, like, whatever your take on it is, like, your health is foundational. It's really important. And I think, you know, what I always say is nobody wants better nutrition. If we could eat whatever we wanted to, good or bad or whatever, and have our better health, then we would. And the issue is when we're younger, typically, unless we encounter any health issue when we're younger, if we're pretty healthy when we're young, we can actually fake it. Our body is like, you know, it's like a new car. Like, our body can pretty much run pretty well until it needs a tune-up. But as we get older, our body doesn't have it in it to fake it any longer. It's like, you've asked a lot of me, and so I need you to actually take care of me, you know, and work better on that part. So actually, and it's interesting, the quiz that you take when you come to the Better Nutrition Program is designed to help you, like, really look at what is your key health goal right now. And I've had a lot of people say, well, I can't pick, like, which is my health goal. And I'm like, well, so that would be like getting into your car and saying, like, I want to go to Columbus, Ohio. Wait, I think I want to go to Indianapolis. Hold on. I want to go to Austin, Texas, right? And it's like your GPS doesn't know what to do. And so I think one of the pieces that you have to look at is, like, really, what is it that you really, really want? So sometimes people will say to me, Ashley, I just want to be the weight that I was when I was 23. Or, Ashley, I just want to look like, you know, fit into this outfit that I have in front of me. Okay. And then, but is that really your goal? And when we dive a little bit deeper, it's like, so I'm going to that reunion, and I just feel like, you know, the last time I was at the reunion, I had just had a baby. Everyone thinks I'm, like, you know, chubby in my later in life, and I was this hot cheerleader when I was younger, and or I just got divorced, and now I'm back out dating, and I'm, you know, whatever it is. And when you actually unpack, you get really to the goal, and the goal is, I am nervous about putting myself forward right now. And so I want to have all of these pieces. Well, when we get to that actually helps me understand a lot, because I can now turn around and say, so I will tell you this, there are some ways that you could lose weight that will make you cranky, not look so pretty, like, you know, all these other things, you know, have skin issues, whatever. Let's not bring those in. You know, let's look at this thing over here for you, because you're out there, you're wanting to impress with your, you know, external self. Or, you know, somebody else might say, I have a lot of people who start off with talking about weight loss as a goal. And what it really turns out being is they're terrified that by being heavier now, they're a bad example for their child, or they're not going to be around to be able, you know, they can't participate in activities with their child, or they're not going to be around, they're not going to live long enough to be around later in their child's life, or, you know, those pieces. And that, like, you know, this is when, like, I'm always, like, bawling with my clients and we're talking about it. But, like, when you actually know that, you turn around and say, hey, we don't need you to actually get to the weight that you were when you were 23. We need you to be healthy. Let's figure out what your healthy weight is today. And more importantly than that, even if you don't lose any weight right now, there are ways that we can help you get healthier so that you know that you're going to be able to do those activities or be around or whatever. So I think the most important thing right now is, instead of picking a diet, and it's not a resolution like, oh, I have this goal, but really use this time to get really clear on, what is that goal and what does it mean to me? What does it really, really mean to me? I think that's that starting point that is often overlooked.
Because I totally agree with that. There's so much hidden messages behind when it comes to weight loss. And I always wonder, though, we have a lot of information out, and yes, there's confusion, as we always know, but people can eat so healthily, and so many choose not to. To me, it's like, why would you eat chips with your lunch, to use a simple example, when you could have a banana or an apple?
Right.
What is it that makes you want to eat that way?
Yeah.
That you grew up with this, but I'm always just amazed. I'm like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too, right? Because I even break that down sometimes, and I'll say, well, so remember, your potato chips, your apple, and your banana, those are all carbohydrates. So if you're having, what else you're having for lunch, if you're having a sandwich, then the bread was your carbohydrate. You don't get to have the apple, the banana, or the chips, right? So, and then we turn around and we say, like, well, if you really are craving chips, which chips do you choose? But I've kind of broken it down into more, to answer your question, into three different areas. So one area is, there are ways that we were raised. And I remember literally getting into a screaming match in college with one of my my roommate at the time, who I adore. She's like one of my dearest friends. We were making guacamole for the people that were coming over. And we were leaving, and she was going to get the sour cream. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, you put sour cream in I was like, you don't make guacamole. And we got it, like, literally, if we were drawing swords, like, and I was like, I am not making guacamole. Like, my guacamole is not going to have, and it had nothing to do with calories or health or anything else. Her mom made it with sour cream. My mom didn't. How I learned how to make it. And it was basically saying, like, you are telling me my mom is wrong, or my childhood is wrong, or, and I encounter this a lot, especially with like cleaning supplies, which is maybe even an easier one to turn around and say, like, hey mom, like, can we use, like, it's actually not good for us to use that, thing that you've been, oh, by the way, for years washing our clothes in, like, I now want you to wash it in something different. All my mom hears is, like, you are telling me that I've done something wrong your entire life. And I'm like, okay, that is not what we need to do. And by the way, we can't tell our doctors the same thing too. One of the rudest things that we can do is say to our doctors, you weren't taught anything about nutrition. They know that. So if we go in and just, like, yell at them about that part. So there's one piece, which is, it is very hard when we make someone feel bad about what they have done in the past or the way that they were raised. So for example, what you might be unpacking is their mom may have put a sandwich and chips in their lunch box, and that's what they took to school every day. And so when you tell them not to have the chips, you're basically telling them, like, what their mom did for them every day, which was love, is something that was wrong, right? So we have to turn around and say, again, hey, what's your goal? Well, my goal is better blood sugar. Well, when we have a sandwich and we have chips, we're getting 3 servings of carbohydrate, and your body your blood sugar, get in terms of what goes into your blood, can probably only handle 1. So if we want the chips, maybe we do a turkey and cheese roll up, but we still need to get veggies in there. So maybe we have, lettuce and cucumber, whatever. And we have that conversation, which, so I think there's that bucket. There's another bucket, which is I have tried diets so many times and failed them. And if I'm that person, then what you're doing by talking about my chips is you're reminding me of every failure, every diet that told me, like, just like we just brought up fruit and chips. And now Ashley's saying, like, the fruit wasn't even a good choice. She's saying, like, what are you doing on that part? So there's a lot of, like, the failure bucket, like, on that piece. And then the third part is, we've done a really poor job of explaining to people what their bodies actually need to run better. And said differently, I did a really great job in my early years of marketing really bad information. So I told you that a better breakfast, every time you saw a commercial, a better breakfast was cereal, a large glass of orange juice, cereal with milk, toast with jam on it, and a piece of fruit. we know that today. Even Michael Phelps wouldn't eat that. That is literally like so much carbohydrate, going in at one time. And so I think part of it, and our job and the whole goal of the Better Nutrition Program is actually not to judge. Like, it's just to say to you, we want to help you figure out what are your better choices and then give you the tools to make them more often. And so we have to figure out, like, hey, is there something in the choice that you're making nutritionally that's actually going to help your body run better? And if the answer is no, then we just want to acknowledge that and be like, you know what, I just love the chips. And it's like, okay, then you can just have the chips. Hopefully they're not a bad quality version of the chips, or if they are, then you just don't have them that often. But you can't get away with then the other stuff not being good, or you have to just acknowledge you're not going to reach your health goal if you continue to have the other part. So I think figuring out and explaining those buckets is really important as a practitioner, so that we can help other people make their be inspired to make their better choices.
I like your 3 buckets, because there is the blame, there is the feeling guilty, there is all of this nonsense going on behind the scenes when you go, what is really going on? And I love the idea when you said, like the chips, because I remember when I raised my kids, and they're now in their 30s, they would go to other friends' house and they're like, Mom, they don't eat like we do. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, they always have whole milk and chips and chicken nuggets and stuff like this. And I'm like, really? Do people like this? And they're like, yeah. So that was, even back then, 30 years ago, that was an eye-opener to me, because that's not how I was raised, and that's not how I fed my kids.
Right.
I love the 3 buckets, which brings me to, of course, it has to come up, sugar cravings.
Yes. Totally.
Everybody and their grandmother is asking, why do I crave sugars? Why can't I stop sugar eating? Yeah. Let's crush the sugar.
Well, I think like one of the pieces is, so first, whenever you tell someone they can't do something, I describe it for me as like my bratty 2-year-old comes out and is like, you're not going to tell me what I can and can't do. I'm like, it's like the opposite. It's like I would go, I would turn around and be like, oh, I am going to have sugar, that kind of a thing. And so I always start off with, and we have the added sugar evaluation. I think knowing your added sugar intake is really important, because there naturally is sugar. So sugar is something the body uses. It uses it successfully to, whether you're keto or not, but it's very successful for mood and for hormones and for our energy and a lot of good things. But the quality of that sugar, the form of that sugar, the carbohydrate, is going to be important for us to understand, and how much you have at one time. And so I think when you look at your added sugar, that's an area where, first and foremost, you want to be aware of, is there any hidden added sugar? Are there things that are coming in that I'm not even aware of, right? And so I think on that part, I've had countless people say to me, like one woman said to me, oh, I don't get in any sugar. And I said, oh, okay, so let's go through your evaluation. And we went through everything. Well, she was having gummies 3 times a day, gummy vitamins. She's like, no, but those are my supplements. I was like, right. Totally. But your sugar budget is done. Like, you can actually not have any more, because you've had your 6 teaspoons of added sugar in a day just from your gummy supplements. And so, and by the way, quality gummies, not just because I've developed some for a couple of companies, but quality gummies can be an amazing way to get in those key nutrients. You just have to account for that you're getting in that added sugar in that way, right? And so I think it's, first of all, knowing. So I always have people do the added sugar evaluation. And then the second part is thinking about sugar in general, like and understanding that it has a stimulant potential, because it's providing us energy. So even the most basic like carbohydrate is going to you might not think of like lentils as doing much other than being like, oh, they're delicious or coming in, but they're actually giving your body a sustained amount of a stimulant of that energy boost. But when we get that in, we want to understand what happens when that goes away. So one of the reasons that we crave sugar is we're doing a lot of like peaks and valleys throughout the day, peaks and valleys. From a sugar standpoint. The other is we can be doing things with stimulants. So we might be having caffeine, and then that caffeine wears off and we're really energy deprived, and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm having a stimulant craving. And in my brain, I associate that with sugar. Another one for cravings is if you're tired. If you are tired, your body is going to scream out for sugar, because it's the quickest way for your body to get energy. Now, you have to ask yourself, are you actually in need of energy? Because most of the time, you're actually in need of sleep, or exercise or recovery. And you shouldn't be, the sugar craving is actually could be better addressed by addressing what's causing the craving in that space. And so I think that then, the other part of it is we've also tuned our taste buds to a very high level of sweetness, especially if we've had any artificial sweeteners, if you were a diet soda person or, had any of the artificial sweeteners, maybe back in like the day of the Atkins products and, not to blame that company, but when we were doing Atkins and we were all we were sugar free, a lot of people moved over into the artificial sweeteners or even some of the natural sweeteners, which are thousands of times sweeter than what an apple would be. So I always have people do the apple test, and that is if you eat an apple and it doesn't taste sweet to you, not a green apple, but if you eat an apple and it doesn't taste sweet to you, that means you need to actually retrain your taste buds. That's a really good way to basically say, hey, I need some help. It's a good time period to say for 6 weeks, maybe you're going to have no added sugar. Or it might be looking at when am I getting, what are the sources of carbohydrate that I'm choosing? So on the Better Nutrition program, we have the sugar evaluation. We also have a no added sugar menu. And we also have the blood sugar guide. So you can understand how sugar can work to optimize your blood sugar. I think all of those pieces, when you have the knowledge, can help you make better choices.
Yeah, and it's a good point when you said, when you grab sugars as a triathlete, oftentimes when we train for long hours, which can be up to 8 hours on the bike, you need nutrition, and oftentimes is what I call them. They're like little sugar packets, but they're like this liquid sugar, and then you start eating stuff. But you literally at this point you just want to sleep or you want to be done exercising.
Right.
But at this point you need the sugar to keep going. Otherwise you wouldn't be able. So a completely different scenario than the average person who goes to the gym or works out once a day. Is not an endurance athlete. So. Yeah.
We were actually just talking, I was just with a friend of mine, and her son is an athlete in high school, and we were talking about how frustrated the parents have been because the coach's approach, especially to football, has been, you guys just need to keep getting calories in. It's like, hold on a second, because a lot of them are getting in sugar calories. And one of the things that's really important to understand about sugar and sugar cravings is that when we take in more of that sugar, it can be promoting an unhealthy inflammatory response. And so especially for an athlete, you want to manage your inflammation so that you're, just the act of 8 hours, especially for you, but if for anyone when they're working out, that you're creating some inflammation and some toxins and things that need to be removed. The other final piece is that sugar cravings are my number one. When somebody tells me they have sugar cravings, I'm like, you're 99% sure you need a digestive tune-up, because when the digestive system is out of whack, whether if you have loose stools or constipation or bloating or any of these pieces, very often sugar or a balance or an imbalance of good and bad bacteria, those kinds of things are implicated. So I usually just send people over to the Better Nutrition program and I'm like, grab the digestive tune-up. Let's do that for a period of time. So if I had my druthers, everybody in this country would do a digestive tune-up in January and then do whatever program they want to do for weight loss in February or March, on that part.
I think that wouldn't be a bad idea, because just thinking of what I ate and drank over the holidays.
Right.
I'm like, oh yeah, my gut needs a break, which brings me to wine.
Yeah.
Many of my ladies, and I'm one of them, we love to drink wine.
Yeah.
Now, is it better to drink organic wine than normal wine? Is it better to drink red wine or white wine? Do we keep the fat on longer if we drink wine? That was like major questions that I constantly get.
Yeah, no, and not just you. I mean, I did in the holidays, I did an episode. It's the second year in a row I did an episode on Dr. Oz about that. I answered a lot of questions. And I do have the Better Nutrition Wine Guide, and I'll send people to that for specific information because I can talk quickly, but also it asks you questions that are more specific to you, I think, on that part. And it is funny because, of course, on a segment, it's edutainment. So we're saying like, hey, this wine's going to be lower in calorie or this wine. But the overarching is I always say go with what you actually like the taste of, because you're more likely to drink an appropriate amount of what you like the taste of and enjoy it, rather than like the thing we shouldn't be doing is drinking wine that doesn't taste good or doesn't taste good to us, like that's not a win. Even if it's like, oh, this white wine is a healthier version than that one. Like, no, drink what you like the taste of. So can wine keep us from our better health goals? Absolutely. So can wine at night keep us from sleeping better? Can it, can the wine, so wine is metabolized and alcohol is metabolized down its own pathway, which means that unlike nutrients that go through and metabolize, and you've got the Krebs cycle and all those great sciencey things that we've learned, unfortunately, when alcohol gets broken down, it requires its own enzyme. As women, we start off with less of that than men, and then over time, we're losing it. So a lot of us, as we age, have less of that enzyme. So we may have alcohol that goes into our body not broken down, which can be toxic and can be harder on the liver, harder on the digestion. But the other part is that when our body's receiving that, it sends a signal that like, we're good. We don't need any more nutrients. So it diverts what we've taken in from a food standpoint really off to fat storage. So can it be keeping us from that fat loss? Absolutely. Especially if you're somebody who is very dialed in on, and you're like kind of at your last 5 pounds or that piece. But that's always where I want to walk a fine line, and we'll have the conversation of like, so first of all, how badly do you want to lose those 5? And second of all, if not having the wine causes stress or makes you upset, so maybe it's less wine or maybe it's less often, like that might be the key. Or it might be switching your wine to like 4 or 5 o'clock, having a glass at the end of your day, having a light dinner earlier, and then not having something later. So I think there are ways to incorporate it in where you can be more successful. And then the final piece is 9 times out of 10, the same people are asking me about wine are asking me about sugar. So you also have to realize that it's a world of choices, right? We cannot eat cookies, chocolate, cheese, and wine and get the goals that we want in one day, but we can incorporate all those different things, if we want them. It's just really about first and foremost understanding your body and making sure that you have a digestive system that is efficient and effective working for you.
Okay, so anybody listening to this, you can rewind and listen to this again. So yes, you can have your wine, but so I love it because that's definitely a lot. It's like, I can't give up my wine, but then I want to have olives and crackers and cheese. And I'm like, yeah, maybe not all at once.
Right. Exactly. And the reality of it is you'll so much more enjoy it. What both of us really orient towards is when you understand this stuff and how the body works and how it uses food and what your system needs, then you can make choices. Well, when it's a choice, you feel so much more empowered. So I love that choice. And oh, by the way, be a health enabler, a better health enabler for your friend. So if your friend says, tonight I'm choosing not to drink. Now, it's not really fair if you're the friend that says, I'm choosing not to drink, and you made plans to go out for cocktails with someone, right? But if you tell someone ahead of time and say, hey, I'm choosing not to drink, could we go for a walk and get together instead? Or could we do, this kind of a thing? But also, if your friend is choosing not to drink, then support them in that part and turn around and say, okay, I get that you're making that decision. I do this all the time. I'm like, you know what? That's great. What I really want tonight is a glass of wine. So as long as you're fine and I'm fine, we're good on that part. I think as women, we don't always support each other enough in the decisions that we may feel like. I'll express it for myself, and what my clients have said is like, you almost are judging yourself when you're watching. Like if that person's not drinking the wine, you're saying, I feel badly because I'm drinking the glass of wine. And I'm like, don't. I'm like, really enjoy your glass of wine. Only feel badly if you're having a bad glass of wine would be my point. Yeah.
Very true. So what would be some nutrition strategies that you can give advice on for women, especially women like I said, peri and menopause and menopause now, that are always talking about how tired they are, how they can't sleep, and not even talking about the night sweats, but mostly the fatigue and the brain fog and the no energy and gaining weight and just slowing down.
Yeah. So the first thing I would do is just exhale, right? And I think that like we just need to take time and say, like, sometimes we can literally look up and the last 5 years have happened and our body doesn't look the way that we think it or work the way that we think. Or we're just really hard on ourselves. So when you're hard on yourselves, you're actually producing stress, which is actually going to keep belly weight on, like not helpful. So there is a hierarchy of how you and I would look at this as like, what are your goals? And I would try to rank them and get to really at the top of the list, like, what is it? So is it I physically need to feel better. Like I'm fatigued. My fatigue is so bad. So when we address fatigue, we often address like sugar cravings. We often address making less good choices. We often, so many of these other pieces. And so within that space, we would look at, am I giving my body what it needs to actually sleep better, right? Or if I'm not sleeping better for a reason, maybe like I deal with a lot of women who, while they're going through menopause, say that their husbands, because of their prostates, are now waking up in the middle of the night, and that gets them up. And so it's actually disruptive to their sleep cycle. And, gosh, I just got my sleep back from, menopause. So we have to look at a lot of things functionally. It might mean that we need a 15-minute nap once or twice in the day, or, going to bed earlier, or, figuring out those different pieces. I think the second piece to it is understanding the greatest part about nutrition and when you understand what the body needs is that like what's good for your heart is good for your skin, is good for your belly, is good for your bones. Like we have all these separate tips for all the different parts of the body, and it's just false. It's just flawed. There may be things that we need to really boost up on if we're having a particular injury or an issue in an area. But, really looking at giving your body that total nutrition is going to help your body, your particular body, when you have your prescription, your nutrition, it's going to help your body run better. So, some of the things that like stand out to me are really looking at the types of omega-3s that you're getting in. So we have our omega-3 evaluation, but for perimenopause and menopause, I'm so keen on one of the omega-6s called GLA. I refer to it as the glamour fatty acid because it's your hair, skin, nails, dryness, like might be vaginal dryness, it might be skin dryness, but also your hormones, all of that. And that particular fatty acid, we end up oftentimes getting it in a supplement. Maybe we've been told to take evening primrose or borage oil. But you can get it in hemp seeds and hemp seed oil and wild salmon and, these different food choices. And so, really looking at making sure you're getting the broad spectrum of omegas in is going to be, better for you. And then the Better Nutrition Plan, which we also have on the site, very, very simple to go through. And what we want to look at is what am I already doing better? What are the choices I'm making that are working? And now what else do I need to do? But make sure in adding something or improving upon something that we don't undo something else that is really good. And I think that's the problem with dieting that I get upset with, which is a lot of these diets or starting a diet is like, oh, I'm going to just stop doing everything that I was doing and I'm going to start this new thing. And our body actually just gets really irritated and confused. And so the better approach here, in my opinion, is if you're going to make changes or do something new, try to do them on maybe on about a 4 to a 6 week cycle. I like 6 weeks because that allows for a full hormonal cycle. And even if you are in menopause, you still have cycling hormones. And so what we want to do during that time period is really see how your body does with something across that time period, rather than, I was just talking to another dietitian colleague and she was saying, people will like try CBD, for example, and like after a week be like, it didn't work for me. And we're like, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, with a digestive tune-up, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, you really have to give it the time to see how it works on that part.
Yeah. Are there 3 specific lifestyle recommendations that you would have for women in that time frame of midlife that
Sure.
benefit from?
Yeah, and I think it's always changing. I mean, the hard part for us all emotionally, I'm more into the foray of like finances at this point, and a lot of the parallels between financial health and physical health. We don't know how long we're going to live. It means it's impossible to plan our retirement accordingly. Like if we only knew we had 10 years, we could look at how we divide $500,000, but what if we end up having 50 years, right? So it's really hard. And from a physical health standpoint, we might call something middle life, but then we're around somebody who's like 100 and we're sitting there saying, well, what if I'm not in middle life? What if I'm in my first third, and that kind of a thing. So the first part is, I think it's so unbelievably valuable to have a friend, a confidant, a colleague, someone that you like to talk to, or if you don't have that person and you're able to spend time with somebody who might be more of a stranger by volunteering your time or doing it that way. Or the final piece would be like even following someone on social media. But that would kind of be my last of the choices. But of somebody who's 20 or 30 years older than you, their perspective is phenomenal. Like I remember this 80-year-old woman telling me I'm so young. she's like, you have so much, like, oh, Ashley, like, this is, when I was your, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, it's the way that I would talk to a 20-year-old, like, oh my gosh, on that part. And so I think having someone being and consistently, it's not about interacting with someone, every once in a while you go, if you're lucky enough to go see a grandparent, I think it's really important to, have somebody that's older than you and spend that time. And it should not be your mom or dad. Like that's not the person we want. So I think there's that piece. I always borrow from Jimmy Buffett, and I say, I love his song lyric, if we couldn't laugh, we'd all go insane. We've got to laugh. Like no matter what's going on, if you get on Twitter, or you watch the news, or you're out and you encounter someone who's really angry, or, any of that piece, there's so much energetically that is taking away from us, and it just ages us. And the act of laughing actually is the best anti-aging medicine, because you're moving that oxygen and that carbon dioxide, and you're also moving your abdominal muscles, you're breathing back, so I think laughter to me, I actually have on my intake form for anyone who's seeing me as a patient, what makes you laugh? And when I do interviews, I always like to ask, because it's also a great way to understand how to connect with someone, like, what makes you laugh? So I would say laughter. Somebody else on that part, this is a tough one because my 12-year-old dog is at my right. And so there's a part of me that's like, get a pet, and just answering that part. But that's not the right answer for everyone. I think the other piece is just recognizing that the human body is meant to move. And movement is not exercise. Movement is not even activity. You can be bedbound and moving. And so what we really need to remember is that we put a lot of focus on our food, but we also need, and even like what could be good for digestion and those pieces, but we really need to understand that movement, and even the act of pausing and breathing better, and that, the movement of our breath throughout our body, that's going to be so critical for getting those better outcomes.
Yeah. All these are great strategies. I love them.
Yeah.
I really do. Now, I want also the listeners to know more about the Better Nutrition Program, because you have some amazing evaluation forms. So tell them a little bit more about.
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned I was a practitioner for 20 years, and I kind of in the last 5 or 6 feel like there are when I started, there weren't a lot of people doing what I'm doing. There are a lot of people, which is great. So I was like, oh, maybe I kind of want to move away from this. But I also was know a lot of people who are investing, especially in this country, in their better health and not getting better outcomes. So I did a lot of work talking to practitioners and individuals about why we aren't getting where we need to get. And I think one of the areas that I honed in on, there are people that are doing great work with genetic testing and food allergy testing and intolerances and all of this stuff. And what I really focused in on is, we need to define what our goal is. And we talked about that part. But the other part is you need to know what your current nutrition looks like right now. And is it giving your body what it needs to run better? Or said differently, what does your body need that it's not getting? And when I realized that there weren't easy tools for people to do that assessment work, I started about just creating it. I started off with magnesium, with the notion of stress. 70% of women, 80% of men are not meeting the recommended daily allowance, which is the baseline amount from our government for magnesium in the body. And all of our cells need magnesium to turn off stress. So I started looking at all the reasons that either A, you might need more magnesium. And then I was like, well, hold on, let me look at how do I even know if I'm getting enough magnesium? There isn't a blood test for that. So what I did was I looked at the food. I used the government, the USDA files on so their recommendation was about 400 milligrams for an adult. So let me just look at how, first, am I getting that in? Am I one of those 70% or not? And then second, am I taking in anything or am I experiencing anything that might increase my needs for magnesium? So I created these quizzes, and now we have about 20 of those evaluations. As I was creating them, a lot of people started asking key questions like, well, what about wine? So I was like, well, let me just create a guide about wine, or what about, my skin, or what about beauty products or any of that. So we have tons of guides on there from probiotics, prebiotics, keto, all of this stuff. And the whole notion is to look at your total nutrition, your food, your beverages, your supplements, your medications, as well as your personal choices, whether they're choices or things that you have to do, based on your health. So the Better Nutrition Program is really just a site for tools. It has, and it's not me. I created or the skeleton of a lot of the tools, but I've then gone out and worked with practitioners to improve the recommendations. and to really make them doable. So the notion is better nutrition should be deliciously easy. So we're trying to find ways, and your deliciously easy is going to be different than my deliciously easy. So how do we help people, navigate that space? So we have menus, guides, courses, and evaluations to help you. And if you happen to be a practitioner, a provider who's listening, maybe you're a fitness provider or a nutrition provider, there are also amazing tools for you to use with your clients and your patients. So everybody does better when everyone starts with the same information. And I think that's something that's just missing in medicine and healthcare today.
I love what you just said, that we all start from the same point, and it's not like, oh, I know better than you, and this is better than this, because there is science, there is proof. And if you follow, in my opinion, if you follow the research shows you what the outcome is. And I think, I got a whole bunch of year evaluations for my clients and all my tools through the being an affiliate as well, so I can share that with my clients.
Great.
But I want to encourage everybody to go and look at your site. And how can they reach you?
Just head to thebetternutritionprogram.com, and we also try to have fun on social media. So we're on Facebook and Instagram, so you can check it out there as well. And the quiz that I mentioned is over at the Better Nutrition Program too.
Yep. So it was so awesome to hear all of it, Ashley. This was incredible. I'm so glad that I had found the time in your schedule that you hung out with me despite the Zoom problem. It was a wealth of knowledge, and I can't wait to see you soon in person.
Yes, I can't wait. We'll see you. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.